In the early 1990s, behind closed doors in a Toyota facility outside Nagoya, a team of engineers completed something that should not exist: a 12-cylinder engine, not for a supercar, not for racing, nor for the world to see, built with tolerances measured in microns, balanced like a chronometer, silent as a held breath. It powered a single vehicle, a car never advertised, never exported, never celebrated. A car built for emperors and prime ministers who should never feel the machine beneath them. For 30 years, this engine remained a ghost, a technical achievement so refined that Toyota buried it in silence. This is not a story about power. This is a story about perfection, and why the greatest masterpieces are often the ones we never see. Toyota does not build V12 engines. This is understood. This is doctrine. Toyota builds engines that last 300,000 miles, engines that start in Siberian winters, engines that never ask for attention. They build 4 cylinders that run forever, 6 cylinders when absolutely necessary, hybrid systems that rewrite efficiency. But a V12 is extravagance, a V12 is European, a V12 is everything Toyota's philosophy rejects: complexity, excess, impracticality. And yet, in 1997, Toyota unveiled the 1GZ FE, a 5-litre, naturally aspirated, quad-cam V12 engine that would never leave Japan. An engine so meticulously engineered that it contradicted every assumption about what Toyota would build. This contradiction is where the story begins. The engine lived inside a machine called the Century, not a sports car, not a luxury sedan in the Western sense. The Century was something else entirely, a rolling shrine to Japanese industrial restraint, built for government ministers, for executives of zaibatsu conglomerates, for members of the imperial household. A car that appeared at state funerals and treaty signings, always black, always silent, always present, but never noticed. Toyota never advertised it. No commercials, no press releases, no dealership promotions. You could not walk into a showroom and order one. You did not choose the Century. The Century was offered to you if you were someone who already understood what it meant. It was not a car designed to impress crowds. It was designed to honor tradition, to embody Omotenashi, the Japanese principle of selfless hospitality. The machine should serve perfectly, invisibly, without ego, and for that mission, Toyota needed an engine that could disappear. The decision came during Japan's lost decade. The bubble had burst. The economy contracted. Extravagance became embarrassment. Companies that had built glass towers and private art collections now faced austerity. But inside Toyota, a different kind of thinking emerged. If Japan could no longer project economic dominance, perhaps it could demonstrate something deeper. Monozukuri, the art of making things. Not excess, but excellence. Not spectacle, but mastery. The Century had always used a V8. Smooth, reliable, dignified. But for the next generation, the car that would represent Japan into the 21st century, they wanted more. Not more power, more perfection. The directive was quiet, almost Zen-like in its simplicity. Build the smoothest, quietest engine on Earth. Not the fastest, not the most powerful, the most serene. And so, in a country reeling from economic collapse, Toyota's engineers began designing a V12 that would never make money, never win races, never appear in a single advertisement. They built it anyway. Why did Toyota hide it? The answer lies in culture. In Japan, humility is strength, to boast is to diminish. The Century was meant to serve, not to be seen. Its engine should reflect that philosophy. To advertise the V12 would be to violate its very purpose. But there were corporate considerations too. A V12 had no place in Toyota's global lineup. It could not be scaled. It could not be sold in America or Europe without contradicting Toyota's image as the maker of practical, sensible machines. The brand had spent decades building trust through reliability and restraint, not through 12-cylinder extravagance. And then there was the technical reality. This engine was not designed for versatility. It was designed for one purpose, in one car, for one kind of experience. Silence. Perfect mechanical silence. The kind of silence that requires 12 cylinders firing in flawless harmony. The kind of silence that costs millions to engineer and can never be mass-produced. The kind of silence most people will never hear. The 1GZFE is not a modified V8. It is not an enlarged V6. It is a ground-up design, conceived as a 12-cylinder from inception. 60-degree V-angle, the optimal geometry for balance, each bank offset by 60 degrees, creating perfect primary and secondary balance. No balance shafts needed. The engine cancels its own vibrations through pure architecture. Aluminum block with cast iron cylinder liners. Lightweight structure, durable contact surfaces. The iron liners prevent wear. The aluminum dissipates heat. A marriage of materials. Dual overhead cams per bank. 4 camshafts total. 48 valves. Each cylinder breathes through 4 precisely timed openings. Intake and exhaust events orchestrated like a symphony in 12 movements. 2 ECUs, 1 per bank. Redundancy. Precision. Each bank of 6 cylinders managed independently, monitored constantly, adjusted in real time. If one system falters, the other sustains operation. Drive-by-wire throttle control. In 1997, this was rare. Toyota installed it not for performance response but for smoothness. Eliminating the mechanical harshness of a cable linkage, the throttle became a sensor. The engine responded not to metal tension, but to electrical signal. Every choice pointed toward one goal: invisibility. Silence is harder to engineer than power. Power is addition, more air, more fuel, more combustion force. Silence is subtraction. Silence is eliminating every frequency, every resonance, every mechanical imperfection that produces noise. Toyota's solution was architectural. A V12 is inherently balanced. 12 pistons, 12 rods, 12 throws on the crankshaft, each moving in opposition to another. The firing order creates overlapping power pulses. One cylinder reaches peak pressure as another begins its exhaust stroke. The engine never surges, it flows. But balance alone is insufficient. Toyota used precisely weight-matched components, each piston, each rod, each valve assembly, measured and grouped to eliminate micro-variations. Engines are assembled from bins of parts sorted by mass, matched within tenths of a gram. They designed an unusually thick block structure, not for strength, aluminum was already strong enough, for damping. The thick walls absorbed vibration before it could radiate outward. The block became a sound trap. They engineered long intake runners. The distance from throttle body to combustion chamber was extended, allowing air pulses to dissipate, smoothing the induction roar that most engines cannot hide. 12 coils, 12 fuel injectors, 12 perfectly timed ignition events, no shared ignition circuits, no grouped injectors, every cylinder independent, every firing event isolated. The result, an engine that idled at 500 RPM, barely turning, and produced less vibration than a sewing machine. The century's passengers were not car enthusiasts. They were prime ministers preparing for diplomatic meetings, executives reviewing acquisition documents, members of the imperial family travelling in discretion. They should never feel the engine start, never sense a gear shift, never hear a valve train. The machine must vanish. This requirement shaped every decision. No vibration transmitted to the cabin. The engine mounts were hydraulic, filled with fluid that absorbed oscillation. The driveline was balanced to aerospace tolerances. The exhaust system used resonators tuned to cancel specific frequencies. No gearshift shock. The transmission, a 4-speed automatic, later a 6-speed, was programmed for imperceptible shifts. Gear changes occurred during torque valleys, when load was minimal. Passengers should never know the car had changed gears. No mechanical harshness. The V12 produced a continuous hum, a low-frequency tone that felt less like machinery and more like distant turbines. The sound was there, but it existed below conscious perception. In this way, the engine became less a mechanical device and more a kind of industrial meditation. 276 horsepower. That was the output. Not because Toyota couldn't build more, because they didn't need to. Japan's gentleman's agreement limited advertised power to 276 horsepower for domestic vehicles. Toyota adhered, not because they had to, the Century was exempt, but because excess contradicted the philosophy. The torque curve was flat, the red line was modest, the engine did not encourage spirited driving, it did not reward high RPMs, it simply delivered seamless, continuous thrust, enough to move the Century's 2,000 kilograms with grace, never urgency. Everything was optimized for smoothness. Acceleration was linear. Throttle response was progressive. The power band existed not as a peak, but as a plateau, a wide, stable zone where the engine operated in perfect equilibrium. This was not a sports car engine detuned for luxury. This was a luxury engine that never considered sports car priorities in the first place. The 1GZ-FE was not mass-produced in the way Toyota builds Corollas. Each engine was individually tuned. After assembly, technicians adjusted fuel trims, ignition timing, and idle characteristics for that specific engine. No two were identical. Each was calibrated to its own tolerances. Thermal expansion was predicted and compensated. Cold clearances were set knowing exactly how the aluminum block would grow as it reached operating temperature. The engine at 20 degrees Celsius and the engine at 90 degrees Celsius were both accounted for in the design. Perfect idle at 500 RPM. Most engines idle at 700–800 RPM because lower speeds introduce instability. The 1GZ held 500 RPM without hunting, without fluctuation. The flywheel's inertia, the cam profiles, the intake tuning, all aligned to sustain that impossibly low idle. The result was an engine that felt less like 12 pistons and more like a single rotating mass. Longevity was extraordinary. Century engines routinely exceeded 300,000 kilometers without major service. The combination of low stress, precise tolerances, and conservative tuning meant the engine aged imperceptibly. The 1GZ-FE lived in the Century, only the Century. Toyota never installed it in a sports car, never offered it in a Lexus, never considered a performance variant. Internal memos from the era reveal the reasoning: unnecessary complexity. The V12 was too expensive to build at scale, too specialized for global markets, too refined for performance applications. It would need re-engineering for high RPM use, which contradicted its design philosophy. So it remained singular. A masterpiece built for one purpose, installed in one machine, known to almost no one outside Japan. By the early 2000s, the world was changing. Emissions regulations tightened. Fuel economy became mandate, not suggestion. Europe and California led the charge. Vehicles would be judged not by smoothness, but by grams of carbon dioxide per kilometer. Toyota saw the future, and the future was hybrid. The Prius launched in 1997, the same year as the 1GZ-FE1 engine represented the past, the other the future. Toyota's corporate realignment was swift. Resources shifted toward electrification. The V12, magnificent, impractical, incompatible with the coming regulations, was a relic before it reached middle age. It was also too refined for performance. Enthusiasts wanted drama, high red lines, aggressive exhaust notes, the visceral feel of combustion at the edge. The 1GZ offered none of that. It was too civilized, too restrained, and so, quietly, production ended. The final Century with the 1GZ-FE rolled off the line in 2017. 20 years of production. Fewer than 10,000 engines built total. The V12 disappeared as silently as it had arrived. But imagine if Toyota had chosen differently. A Lexus supercar with the 1GZ-FE, not detuned, retuned, higher compression, revised cams, an 8,000 RPM redline, 450 horsepower, delivered with the smoothness of a turbine. A Japanese answer to the Ferrari 456, but with Toyota reliability. A racing variant for endurance competition. Le Mans in the late 1990s, a prototype class dominated by V10s and V12s. Toyota could have entered with a durable, refined engine designed for 24-hour races, not 24-hour sprints. A high-displacement luxury sedan for global markets. A Lexus LS with a V12. Competing with the Mercedes S600, the BMW 76LE, the Jaguar XJ12. Toyota had the engine, they chose not to use it. A global century, export it. Let the world see what Japanese luxury truly meant. Not flashy, not ostentatious, but perfect. All of this was possible, none of it happened. And yet, the engine did not vanish entirely. In the 2010s, something unexpected happened. Enthusiasts began discovering the 1GZ FE. Online forums lit up with rumours. A few engines appeared at auctions, pulled from government fleet vehicles and estate sales. And then the engine swaps began. Rare, expensive, nearly impossible, but achievable. A handful of Supras received V12 transplants. The fitment was a nightmare. The wiring required custom ECU work and hundreds of hours of fabrication. But the result, a Supra with Toyota's only V12, smooth as silk and reliable as a Camry, became the stuff of legend. YouTube videos began to surface. Rare footage of the century's engine bay, close-ups of the intake manifold, its 12 intake runners arranged like organ pipes, and then the sound, or rather the lack of sound. Viewers were baffled. The comments poured in. How is that a V12? It sounds like an electric motor. This is the quietest engine I've ever heard. The myth grew precisely because it had been hidden. Scarcity creates legend. Secrecy creates fascination. The engine that Toyota never advertised became an obsession among those who knew. The 1GZ FE became more famous after it disappeared than it ever was during production. And perhaps that is the point. Toyota built the 1GZ FE to be invisible, to serve without recognition, to exist only as a sensation, smoothness, silence, serenity, never as an object of attention. Its greatness was intentional invisibility. In a world obsessed with spectacle, Toyota built something that rejected spectacle. In an industry chasing horsepower wars, Toyota built an engine that measured success in the absence of vibration. The 1GZ-FE was not a failure. It was never meant to be famous. It was meant to be perfect, and it was. Some masterpieces hang in museums. Others live in silence, known only to those who experience them. The 1GZ-FE is a ghost now. An engineering achievement so refined that it contradicted the logic of its own industry. Too expensive to replicate, too specialized to scale, too perfect to compromise. It powered emperors and ministers. It carried the weight of a nation's dignity. It idled at 500 RPM and whispered like wind through a temple corridor. And then it disappeared. But its absence is not emptiness. Its silence is not void. It is the space where true craftsmanship lives, unseen, unforgotten, undeniable. In a world chasing attention, Toyota built something meant only to be felt, never seen. And sometimes, that is where the true masterpieces live.